Fabulous. Right, so I'm kind of sandwiched in between a nice little AI double bill, I think. Which is quite nice because I think one of the things that we will probably experience is that if students do have some maths anxiety, then they may be more tempted to reach to AI in that panic mode that they have. So I think it actually all flows together quite nicely. This is kind of a cross-faculty work. So I'm here presenting to you as mathematicians, but I'm working with Becca Whitehead and Nicola McIntyre and Sally Organ and they're physicists and biologists and engineers, and so we're reaching lots of different people. Right, I've got the wrong screen up to move forward, so hopefully that slide has moved on. Right, so we're using when I put in the bid, I think as we all do these things, you kind of go, I'm going to put in the bid and hope that I'm going to get offered a talk about middle of next year would be good. I do apologise. I'm kind of working on something that hasn't actually been published yet, some resources, but hopefully they will be in the new year. So I was hoping to be able to give you some usage over the resources, but sorry, I blame the organisers really. Um, right, so basically what we're doing is Becca and Nicola and myself have creating some resources that will go up into Open Learn, which will help students work through coping mechanisms if they are studying for math anxiety. I'm looking at exploring what maths anxiety is, whether they have the symptoms, how to reduce anxiety, and then working with maths in it. And so I'm going to take you through that process over the next sort of 10 to 15 minutes, hopefully. While I do that as well, it'll also help yourselves as well because it will give you ways that you can give advice and help support those students that are suffering from it. There'll be some little drop-ins of background of surveys and interviews and things that I did with Sally Organ from 22, 23. Right, I'm going to try and skip forward to try and leave at least the final speaker some time. So what is mass anxiety? Uh, Professional definition, shall we say? It's that feeling of like anxiety that actually, when you think about working with maths or when you're actually starting to do it, that stops you being able to do it really. So it's whether it's just not doing it, but you know you need to do it, and it just you feel that panic rise when you're about to start doing it, and also when you're working in it and when you're confronted by that problem, and it can be really physical symptoms at times. So it's interesting. So one of the ways, there's several different scales that we use to judge whether people have mass anxiety. I've used mainly the Betts Mass Anxiety Scale, mainly because it's only got 10 questions, so we felt that people might actually answer it. There are lots more in-depth questions that you can have, but ultimately, what our test did was it asked the students these 10 questions, and then they graded it on a Likert scale. But ultimately, if you're going to be suffering from maths anxiety, then you're probably feeling some recognition with some of these statements about maths make me feel uneasy, or, I don't like doing tests in maths, or, you know, it's that standard, oh, I've never been good at studying maths and solving maths problems. And then there's some higher ones that go up to, my mind goes blank and I'm unable to think clearly when it involves maths. So if you're identifying with any of these statements, then it's likely that there will be some level of maths anxiety involved. Um, Interesting, you'd think that if you had something with maths anxiety, then you wouldn't be studying maths at university. Um, it turns out that that's not actually entirely true. There's been a lot of work in supporting students in schools with maths anxiety. I think there's been less work, although there's quite a big body of us now that are working within this topic at looking at maths anxiety and students. Um, and I think one of the reasons why it hasn't happened at universities is obviously you get more choice at universities what to study. So you tend to study the things you're comfortable with and the things that you like. But actually, it turns out that at our university, I'm sure it's the same, even those studying maths degrees still have an element of those of us that are anxious. And I mean, I know that it's something I do feel a strong affinity to. So I think I probably do have a level of maths anxiety floating around me because I can certainly identify with some of those statements. But yeah, we have sort of over 10% of our students that are studying a maths degree will be visibly anxious about studying mathematics. Um, and then there's lots of courses that our scientists and our STEM students have gone into that they may think doesn't cover much mathematics, but there's actually a lot of hidden maths in it too. So looking at our design students, over almost 70% of them are very anxious about mathematics, and yet the first course they study has elements of mathematics in it. And I spoke to the person that teaches that course, and they were like, "We don't have any mathematics in it." And yet, even in their introductory material, they're talking about reflections and and the Fibonacci scale and rotations, and there's so much math element and measuring and scale that that will make students very anxious, even just looking at those introductory materials. So along with Sally Organ, I did some work and we interviewed some students. So all of these students that we interviewed were all highly anxious about mathematics. They all identified as being someone that had a level of high anxiety. And these are some of the comments that they make when they're actually having to look at maths and having to study mathematics. And they all come from STEM students. So they're all got students that have maths within their course. And it's the thought about it makes them want to run away from it and to just avoid it what's completely. And of course, our students can do that because they can just not do the assignments and they can just not do parts of it, or hey, heaven forbid, reach for AI to solve them for them. Um, and it's the students get to the point and they just go, I just can't think of anything because of that sheer terror. My mind goes blank when I'm studying mathematics. So that's actual student views on studying mathematics. So one of the things we're looking at within the material that we're putting up on our website is what that consequence of maths anxiety is. And so that there's even before you actually start the maths and actually sit down and open that maths book, there's lots of things that students are going to do that are going to be anxious about mathematics. So first of all, they're gonna avoid it. I mean, that's a real protection from that anxiety, and they might avoid it. Why are they going to avoid it? Because they think they lack the confidence, it's too unpleasant. Where are they going to start? It is just this self-preservation. So they're going to avoid it as much as they can. They're going to choose courses that don't involve maths. They're going to choose the modules that don't involve maths or the elements of maths that they find stressful. Because it doesn't have to be the whole thing. It can be certain elements that might make them anxious. So for me, anything pure maths related, I'm just like, yeah, no. Mind goes blank, sheer blind panic. Um, Equally, our students are going to procrastinate. They're going to keep delaying it, even though they know they've got to do that assignment, they've got to revise for the test. They're going to procrastinate. They're going to avoid it until they absolutely have to do it. And then, because of course they've avoided it, then they're going to do it in a rush, and that's just going to increase our anxiety levels. And those things that they do to avoid and procrastinate, they're very overlinked and overlapping reasons because there are certain things that are to do with them, but it is that self-preservation that they're doing. They're just trying to stop them putting themselves in that situation that's going to make them anxious, but actually it can increase that anxiety. Right. This is physical symptoms. When a student is has mass anxiety, it's ultimately stress. So it's gonna trigger that real basic fight, flight, or freeze response, which is probably quite useful if you're fighting dragons, but maybe not so useful if you're actually trying to do some maths questions. So I'm not a psychologist, so it is a really basic overview of the symptoms. Sue Johnson Wilder and Claire Lee and others have done a lot of work on some really good descriptions of how mass anxiety affects the brain. Um, and if you want to have a look at that, then it's going to explain it better than I can in the next few minutes. But yeah, if you're getting stressed at something, then your adrenaline levels are going to increase, which is going to give you this faster heartbeat, and it's going to make you breathe more deeply. And that cortisol and those other stress hormones are going to get released, and it gives you that energy for fighting or fleeing. But if you've got that energy for fighting or fleeing, then what you haven't got is the ability to calm yourself and think about maths. And it disrupts that normal activity in the prefrontal cortex. This is where I'm going. I'm not a psychologist. And that's that area of the brain that's really important for thinking and problem solving. And that's why if you're anxious about mathematics, you just go, my mind goes blank, and I can't even remember my own name. I just can't think about anything at all. So what we're going to do, what we want to do within our online course is that first of all we talk to the students about why these things happen and what reactions they could happen, and then we're going to give them some strategies to help them reduce that anxiety, to get them in a place where they can study maths. Um, those strategies is going to need to be this smorgasbord of strategies. It's going to need to be a toolbox. They're going to need to look at lots of different things and see which one works for them and which ones work in certain situations, because you can't just grab one and go, that's always going to work. So we're going to look at a lot of different strategies. So thinking about two different sorts of approaches about the cognitive and also I'm going to move pages now, and also the behavioral approaches. So if we're looking at the cognitive approaches, there's a lot of mental reframing that can go on to help a student get into a point where they can actually sit down and think about maths. And it's one of those ones where you've got to go, just don't drop the belief that they're bad at mathematics. So many students have this feeling that, that they can't do it just because they're bad at it. So, I mean, it's that aim of shifting your mindset away from something negative to something more positive. So, not that they're bad at maths, but just that they've had a bad experience, really. Um, so other things is visualization. So you get them to visualize how they're going to feel when they've actually finished the task, and that motivation of when you've done it and you've done it and you've completed it, then you're going to feel so much better than you are when you're avoiding it or you're procrastinating over it. Create a growth mindset. Believe you have the ability to learn. The students that we interviewed, interestingly, some of those students that had high levels of anxiety did actually still believe in a growth mindset and that you could learn to be able to do mathematics. Although most interesting, I think, is probably the two students we interviewed that were most anxious were very definitely, it's not, there's nothing. You're either born the ability to do maths or you can't. I'll never learn to do it. And they're the ones that had the highest anxiety levels. And also, a lot of students have anxiety because they feel they have to be all correct because it's this black and white subject. It's got to be right or it's got to be wrong. So getting that realism that they don't have to be perfect is really useful. Behavioral practices, you know, externalize it. This is where we get very touchy feeling as mathematicians. We may not be quite so um, good about this. Actually talking to someone about anxiety is that, that old adage, problems shared is a problem halved. It didn't come out of anywhere. It really does help. Equally, journaling when the students become anxious is quite a useful thing because they could then maybe be able to link it to when they're tired or when they're hungry, and so they can maybe able to take themselves out of that situation. Um, these last two are really touching away from what we may feel comfortable with. Um, but it has been proven to work, and that's if it's that creative element. If you can actually put your anxiety into a creative writing or some form of modeling or something like that, that actually just helps you visualize and externalize that anxiety, then it can really help to control it. Um, there's other things you can do, relaxation and rest is really useful. Take those mini rewards and make sure that, hey, solve a maths problem, have a cupcake, have a cup of coffee, have 5 minutes break. Um, exercise is always useful. If you're getting really stressed sitting down, get up, tell them to get up and walk around the room. Even for a short period, it'll help burn off some of that energy and that adrenaline that's been created from that anxiety. Remove distractions. I mean, obviously, the anything that is going to distract them is going to be so much easier to be distracted if it's there. So, it is that put the phone in the other room kind of situation with students. Um, and then it's that proactiveness. We need to discuss them about, making action plans on how they're going to do the task so they don't leave it till the last minute and remove that procrastination. Two techniques that we can think about is it's a technique that's called eat the frog. And it's bizarre thing going, but basically what that term means is do it first thing in the morning. Get up, eat your frog. You've done the worst thing you're probably going to do in the day, and then you can spend the rest of the day feeling good about it. The other one is that you've probably heard of as well is a Pomodoro technique where you get them to set timers to say, right, I'm going to do 25 minutes work and I'm going to do it solidly and I'm not going to have any distractions. I'm going to focus and then I'm going to take a break and then I'm going to come back and do another 25 minutes. And by breaking it up, then the anxiety levels never increase and increase. Right. So if you know anything about mass anxiety, this is probably something that you've seen before, which is the growth zone model, again, written by Sue Johnson Wilder et al. Like I said, they've done so much work in looking at mass anxiety within school children, and they've prepared so many techniques that we can then use within higher education as well. So now, hopefully, the students have got some techniques that have got to the point where they can actually study the maths, but at that point, they're still going to start panicking. So, where we want them to sit, I'm going to leave you to read it and move on a little bit because I think it might be, hopefully, it's quite familiar, but we want students to try and sit in that growth zone so they're not doing stuff that's almost not worth doing, but equally that anxiety hasn't risen and so they're not panicking horrendously. Uh, if they are studying maths and the anxiety hits, we can talk to them about things like, taking short breaks and coming back afresh, do something small, expanding them, move on to a different topic that you're happier with, and then come back to the thing that's creating the anxiety. Ask for help, really. One of the things our students don't do very often. Um, so while the material is still in production, we have run some sessions with our students on using similar techniques, but not the resources themselves. We have spoken to students about that, and within the sessions, one of the things they found out was that actually one of the things that really helped them was knowing that they weren't the only one, and that there were these consequences of anxiety, and that it was just a cycle between getting stuck in anxiety and then not being able to work it and then looking at those coping mechanisms they really thought would help them feel calmer and having those strategies would help them cope with the anxiety. I think it's all about coping with anxiety. You're not going to reduce it, just cope with it. And they're given the confidence to to make mistakes and to ask for help. So what can we do really to help our students? I think it's along the similar lines of what we've been talking about with with what how the students can help themselves really. It's help them to actually explore mass anxiety and and find out why they're reacting the way they do. And I think that's a lot about why are the students procrastinating, why are they asking for extensions, why are they obviously rushing work, why are they reaching for AI. Help them to reflect on past experiences. It's that talking about it that will help. Um, Again, discuss those techniques that we can look that can help to calm the anxieties, discuss different ones, and then when they are actually studying, make sure that they are keeping a monitor on those anxiety levels. And that growth zone model is a really good way of doing it. just to, because sometimes you're hitting your head up a brick wall and you just go, I've got to do it, I've got to do it. And so to stop and to actually realize that you're just too anxious to be able to do it, and then reduce your anxiety and come back to it can be really useful. Um, One of the things we asked our students that were anxious, what advice would you give the maths teachers? And it's about being accepting and being open and acknowledging that actually they're not being a bit useless, but actually they are really quite panicky about these things. And I will stop there. Whistle tour around it.
Right. All right. Thank you very much. Let's a quick round of applause. Thank you. Have we got any questions? I've asked people to put them in the Q&A. There is a comment from Phil Ramsden that says, "Great to see some of the things that students can do about this problem. What can we who teach and assess maths do?" And it says, "I often think we try to challenge our students, and at the same time we penalise them being wrong. There's a tension there." Do you have any sort of comments on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the advice that the students give is quite useful. Um, but you're right. I mean, because obviously we're asking them to be perfect, aren't we? And we're asking them to hand in things on time. And so it, I think discussing things is helpful, and being that more, dare I say, touchy-feely, I think is the answer. I think it's I went to a presentation once where the person was talking about the fact that at the start of their lecture every time they put up a poll so that students could in, and it was just like a simple like, how are you feeling today? Poll. And if actually the students as a general rule were not feeling good, then actually they'd spend sort of those first 10 minutes of the lecture, rather than launching straight into the material, but maybe looking at doing some things that can help. I mean, it's things like where are we? I mean, it's things like that. Look after yourself, that relaxation, that rest. I mean, things like some mindfulness exercise and things like that can really help students get into a position where they can then actually concentrate on what they're doing. And and
Right.
and so
So,
for things like so there could be some things we could do at the start of each of the lectures to remind students that actually that they're here to learn and to calm down and to learn. I know I was speaking to it's completely a different issue, but um there was a lecturer that in South Africa, and she used to do that before her every single lecture that she did, because just the students getting to the lectures was a very stressful situation for them. And she said it really helped them. So I think it's being open to the fact that actually every student in that room doesn't necessarily feel comfortable learning mathematics, and that it might be that it's not that they've not done the work, it's that they're struggling to do the work.
right, indeed. Okay, well, I think we're running a little bit short time. There are more questions in the Q&A, and if you can answer those by typing later on, then that would be great, because we can supply those when we put up the videos. So I think what we should do now is, of course, a quick round of applause.